We might be broadcasting live on YouTube. There we go.
See, and it's unmute. Okay, all right.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd. The time is 7:01 p.m. and we're going to go ahead and call the Community Engagement Committee to order. So first, we're going to start off with welcome and introductions. Joaquin is unable to join us today, so he's asked that I facilitate and fill in to the chair spot. So my name is Robert Marshall. I am a member of this committee. I am a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission, and I will pass it off to our guest, Marianne, to introduce herself.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Marianne Bradshaw. I live in Ward 4, and I'm very happy to be joining you this evening as a guest. Gretchen?
Yeah, you bet. I'm Gretchen Bennett. I'm the staff liaison to the commission and use she, her pronouns. Oh, and how about Kate?
Hello, this is Kate Strathy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm on the Community Engagement Committee.
Hey there.
Yep, go ahead. I was gonna say Ilana.
Process of elimination. Hi, I'm Ilana Lynn. I use they, them pronouns. I am a member of the Human Rights Commission and this committee. Excited to be here, and thanks for joining us, Professor Bradshaw.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, we'll move into public comment. Gretchen, have we received any public comment for today's meeting?
None received.
All right, the next item of business is approval of the consent calendar, which includes the minutes from last month's meeting and today's agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion by Alana, seconded by Kate. Any objection? All in favor? Aye or thumbs up? Perfect. Consent calendar passes. We'll go ahead and move on to the Community Belonging and Discrimination Survey. We are joined today by Professor Bradshaw, who's from Western Oregon University, who's helped us facilitate this survey for the last several years. And so I will turn it over to Professor Bradshaw.
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here in the fall because it's a great time for us to be thinking about.
You mean spring? Right.
No, that I'm here in this meeting in the fall. Because that gives us plenty of runway to think about what we're going to do in the spring.
I feel like we should start planning in March, but that's okay. No, I'm kidding. No, I appreciate you being here early. No, no, this is great. It's going to give us a lot of time to get it done. So
Yes. And one of the things that I have felt is, over the years, the survey's evolved a little bit and the objectives have evolved a little bit. And I feel like this last year, the students and I had a whole conversation that was almost just like a patchwork. And there was a couple questions at the beginning about community belonging, and then a bunch of questions about experiencing discrimination. So we called it firsthand discrimination, like you yourself have experienced it, and then secondhand discrimination, where you've witnessed, observed, heard about. And then we have some questions about bias crime, and then we have some questions about the Human Rights Commission, and then of course we wrap up with just your own demographics that allow us to slice and dice the data. And I know why each of those sections is there. And part of what I want, and why I'm so happy to have this conversation early, is to say, like, what is most beneficial to you? Because over the years, we've kind of incrementally changed the questionnaire, but this is an opportunity to kind of set that to the side and say, like, what's actionable, what's useful, and if it looks totally different, let's do something totally different in the spring. And we originally asked a lot of questions about discrimination and that experience, and I think that has been actionable to the commission. But we haven't seen a lot of very different responses over time. And so is it useful to confirm, like, this continues to be similar? Or, we changed the title of the survey from the discrimination survey to the community belonging survey. And last year, the students and I had extensive conversations about, if that's what we're calling this, then shouldn't there be more questions about community belonging? But then we kind of all sat around and scratched our heads and said, well, we need to get this repealed next week and we don't really know what to ask. And I did find a tool that, researchers have used in a variety of communities. And I thought maybe there's something out there that we could benchmark against. And it wasn't exactly the right thing. And anyway, I just feel like it's a really great opportunity for me to hear from you. Like, this is the direction to go, or these are the kinds of questions that would really be most useful to us, or here's the section from the survey that was most helpful, or this was not helpful. And one of the things that I've wondered about is if community belonging is really the topic that's most helpful. And I'm saying I don't really know quite what to ask. Maybe you know. And if none of us really know what to ask, in that situation, we probably want to do qualitative research. I'm willing to work with my students and say, let's do some focus groups, let's do some interviews. We probably can't do both in the same year, but if we alternated and said 1 year we're going to do more of a qualitative approach and 1 year we're going to do more of a quantitative approach, we would get into some questions around funding and logistics. But I think what I'm trying to say to you is this doesn't have to look like what it's looked like the past few years. And I'm really interested in hearing from you what would be most actionable and useful. And then I can say, okay, but then that would take this kind of funding, or okay, I'd have to adjust the syllabus in this way and I can do that. So I kind of feel like I was driving in with like really big picture questions.
Yeah.
But does that help to kind of frame it up that way?
I think so.
Yeah, let's go ahead and turn it over to some discussion. It looks like Alana's got their hand raised.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I hadn't considered the idea that we could do qualitative research, so I would love to know more about what you would picture for that and like what types of information we'd be able to gather. So I think that that's definitely like a branch worth discovering. And I fully agree with what you were saying about it being like very discrimination heavy. And I do think that we could have like 3 to 5 questions. Okay, first question, actually. How many questions do you usually aim for in the survey total? Like, I know at some point people stop responding and all that.
Yes. My typical guide is 20. We're just slightly over.
We're at 25 last year.
We're at 25. But
Yeah, so I would say like 3
like to be at
questions on discrimination. Just like, do you feel like discrimination in Salem has gotten worse or better in the past year? Where, if you've seen discrimination, where has it been? And then have you personally experienced discrimination would be my 3. And then I'd love more questions on like, where have you felt welcomed, or what in Salem has created a sense of belonging for you? Have you struggled to feel a sense of belonging? Why? And I feel like that's where the qualitative research could be handy, is if we did that first and figured out what questions to ask. And then we did a survey in 2026 with the most impactful questions, but also then we have to wait a year. So not sure how I feel about it, but I like both ideas.
So the questions that you posed around belonging are really, as you acknowledge, more appropriate for a qualitative setting. Like I could put an open-ended question in a questionnaire, and some people do, type a sentence, and some people type a paragraph. But what in Salem has contributed to your sense of belonging? What are the barriers that you've encountered that have made it challenging for you to feel a sense of belonging? One of the challenges that the students and I talked about last year is just even defining community.
Yeah.
The tool that I mentioned, there's kind of a standard sense of community tool, and it's been used in a lot of settings. And the scholarly article that I read that I really liked, they had done the survey at a university with all the freshmen at the end of freshman year. And there were, 3 big buckets, but like 5 or 6 questions in each that you would roll up. And they were comparing actually gender groups. And a lot of the findings was that the gender diverse freshmen felt less of a sense of belonging in the community of their campus. And so then the researchers were making recommendations around shifting that based on the findings from the study. And I was like, okay, so we could take those belonging metrics and apply them, but I was thinking like, I don't even know how I would answer them in Salem because like the community here is so big and it's so diverse. And do I feel belonging in my neighborhood? But that's different than feeling belonging in Salem. And some people feel like a sense of belonging in their, the schools that their families, their kids go to, or in their churches or community-based organizations. And so they may feel a sense of community in one of the sub-communities here. And they feel a very strong sense of belonging in that sub-community, but maybe they don't feel as connected to Salem as a whole. And so even going through like this standard, like tried and true metric of this sense of community, it's like, I don't know. And because I look at that quantitative tool, I'm like, I don't know. Then my thought is maybe we ought to do qualitative. The challenge of qualitative, and Ilana, so I do consulting, and if you guys came to me and said, we want to hire you as a consultant, I would stagger, right? And say, great, let's do a bunch of qualitative that will help us decide how to write the quantitative, and then we can field the survey. And I just did a really cool set of research this summer with the Willamette Health Council around, health and well-being. And we did qualitative community input sessions in Salem. And we also partnered with CBOs. So Pride hosted one, Micronesian Islander community hosted one, The Rock hosted one, YMCA hosted one, Old Believers in Woodburn, and we had English, Spanish. But it was a really cool set of qualitative. But Willamette Health Council has this really massive budget. And so they were able to contract with each of those CBOs, and they paid $4,000 to each of them to host a focus group and provide dinner. And if you're going to ask somebody to spend 5 minutes doing an online survey from the comfort of their own home, it's pretty typical to be like, hey, you can enter a drawing for a gift card. And some people are like, I'm not going to do it, or they do it and they don't enter. But if you're going to say, hey, come to this community space and spend an hour and a half sharing, your experiences and your heart, you kind of have to say, and here's a dinner and a $25 gift card, or here's a $30 gift card and a Willamette Health Council hat. I mean, so to really do, and you ask what would qualitative research look like, to do a set of qualitative research like what I would dream up, even if I said I'll donate my time, which I'm willing to do, we have to compensate people who are coming. Even if we could talk some of them into coming for free, I just don't feel ethically that it's appropriate to take advantage of people's time without offering. So the food, the space, the gift card to do extensive qualitative research takes funding, and I don't know how to get around that. I have asked the students in the past to do some qualitative because I feel like it's a really important part of understanding the numbers is to at least have had conversations with people about what we're looking at. And so they have done just one-on-one interviews with people in their circles where we give them a discussion guide and they're asking about community belonging, discrimination, the kinds of things in the survey, so that when they go then to slice and dice the data, they're not just saying, oh, this percent, that percent. They're like, I actually talked to people about some of these questions. And I think it gives them, even if it hasn't done a great job of informing the questionnaire in the past, it gives them, I think, perspective to interpret the findings. Yes, please.
Okay, just an idea. Would it be possible for the HRC to do mini qualitative research for you before spring comes around, where we could have just 3 questions that are open-ended that we ask whenever we're tabling at events? We can be like, hey, can you just take a quick survey with us? And then we could give you that information. It wouldn't be fully that way it's not a huge ask of people and they're already at events.
I think that if you have a format where you can talk to people and understand some of these questions around community belonging enough that we know what to ask, then yes. Because I do feel the balance of the questionnaire to say, what I'm hearing from you is it's really more actionable for us to explore more around belonging. We don't want to take discrimination out necessarily 100%, but if you do have opportunities to hear from people about what helps them feel that sense of belonging, what are barriers to that sense of belonging, and then you can help craft those questions, sure, that would be awesome.
Okay,
Uh,
oh, sorry, Alana.
Kelsey and I had started to draft a survey similar to this. I think it was actually for the LGBTQ committee. But I think that it would be possible for us to do that. And that way we can get around some of the budgetary restrictions. So maybe we can share that survey with this committee as well, and we can discuss as like a whole commission how to expand it.
You bet.
Yeah, and let me know if there's any background noise, but I think the one thing that I would want to know is just like what do people want from the Human Rights Commission? Like we have the Transgender Day of Remembrance, we are talking about missing and murdered Indigenous Women's Day, we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about sanctuary cities, but what is the public, what is their priority? So that would be like my question of what else do they want to see from us that would make them feel like they belong?
I think that's a great direction to go. I feel like the way it translates better to quantitative is if you can give them options. So like Alana, you say, okay, we can have some conversations and help write a question. Kate, I would say to you, like, if you have a list of things you're considering doing, or like, here's the couple things we've been doing, and here's a couple ideas we're exploring. If you can say, great, like, let's give people these ideas and say, here's a sentence or two about 4 ideas. If we were going to do one of these next year, which one would you want us to do? That I think people react in a survey much better than they create. So instead of saying like, what do you want HRC to do? I would say, hey, we can do A, B, and C. Which one do you want us to do?
Yeah, like rank your topics and, order of importance, or, things you're gonna see. What's the question? Oh, I was gonna say, I think one of the things that was helpful last year in the questions was, people kind of reporting where they, kind of where they felt the safest. Like it helped us kind of gather like a lot of insight, and, people like, like identifying safe spaces within the community. And a lot of people had mentioned, like the library being a safe place, which was very, I think, informative for both, the HRC as well as the city as a whole. I wanted to kind of go back to, you were mentioning, with the focus groups, and you mentioned that, they take money, even though, you might be interested in donating the staff time.
Yeah.
There's still the other costs. In your experience, what would that look like? How much would in your opinion, to get the amount of focus groups that you'd want out of this and the level of engagement, what would you say would need to be kind of like the fundraising part of it?
I might kind of even have to map it out. And part of the challenge is that, for example, if we felt like then we need groups in Spanish and Marshallese and Cherokee and Russian, then that's gonna have higher costs, and we've got to pay a moderator and translators. So, per group, if you can find a space that's free, that's great. And I like a smaller group. Some people will run a focus group with like 12 people at the table. I like to do smaller groups of 4 to 6 because I feel like if there's 12, it's just really hard for everybody to share. So I would rather do more smaller groups personally. And if you have food for 6 and you give a $25 gift card, I mean, that's $150 in gift cards and maybe $60 in food. So it's not astoundingly difficult in terms of a really tall order. I do think there's time to recruit. And so, structuring that invitation through a community-based organization is really helpful, where they already have newsletters and outgo, so they could invite. And you have really great partners. I mean, you probably could say this organization might partner with us, or even if we, went to the YMCA and said, hey, we know you did some focus groups this summer. Would you do a couple focus groups in this way? And would we use your space if we bring gift cards and food and our moderator? Would you help invite people? And they might. I actually think they probably would. So if you considered your partnerships, we could probably do a group of 6 for $200 in English. The groups not in English, I think it's hard for me to put a cost on that.
I have one little logistical thought to throw into the group too, which is there might be an additional approach of imagining what you want that to look like, but then taking time to fundraise or find a grant partner to fund that for not 25 but 26, spring 26, and do a quantitative survey again in 25, but look ahead to 26 for a qualitative that we can do with a grant partner. That we could apply for a grant to an investor. That's an additional idea, maybe.
Yeah.
I'd say it's worth pursuing to see like the 3 options of, can the HRC do some of it ourselves? What would it cost to do like 5 focus groups, at least 2 in Spanish, and whatever you think would probably be best, and then just like cost that out a bit, and you can assume that we will find a space, because I think that that's something we would be able to do. And then also think about, can we fundraise, find an investor for 2026? And then once we have all of the options, we can maybe bring that to the HRC as a whole.
I think Broadway Coffee House is a good place too. And I know like with the neighborhood associations, they have food and they probably pay for it. But I think it's also because it's the end of the day, it might be discounted. So because it's like the baked goods at Broadway Coffee House from Dough Hook. So we could also look into that logistically. Like they have the space, they have which they may even comp us if we're just asking, like, hey, is that okay if we could use this space if we're doing this on behalf of the city? Since it's run by Salem Alliance. But Salem for Refugees is really close. They have a very diverse community in that area around Broadway. So I think we would get a diverse audience if we were able to do something there.
I also attended a focus group. Is it Pringle Hall? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Pringle?
We own Pringle.
Right. And the city, I think, if you booked it, I don't think there's a cost.
For free.
If I booked it, there's a cost.
That's correct.
So that also would be a location that you could consider.
Yeah, I can acquire the city locations at no charge because we're a city commission.
So that's great. Yeah, good options.
What would, so I guess just so we kind of have an idea of, action items and going forward, are we wanting to pursue a quantitative survey for calendar year 25 and then explore cost logistics and begin the planning for a qualitative survey, like a qualitative data collection in 26, or are we looking to try to squeeze in a qualitative
I'm thinking
piece
it
for
depends on the
25?
funding.
So I'll just chime in. The students' term is only 10 weeks. So in terms of partnership with the students, I think it's too condensed to say, let's go do qualitative discovery in April, write the questionnaire, get it in field, do the analysis. I could see if you say, hey, the commission is gonna do some qualitative in February, and Marianne, we'd love for you to come help us or not. I mean, I'm looking around, I see several very excellent potential moderators. And we could, Joaquin's not here, we can get him to do it in Spanish. I mean, like, you guys are a very talented bunch. But if you said, we want to do some qualitative in February that will inform the quantitative that the students will do in April and May, that's an option. If you said, we really want to do a round of qualitative that the students lead, I am comfortable shifting my syllabus to more of a qualitative setup where then the students can attend the qualitative and they can take some of the open ends. And there's actually really cool and analytics that can be done from qualitative research when you take those direct quotes and code them in categories. And I mean, there's tools, some of them are clunkier than others, but if you said, what we really need is a big round of qualitative, then I have options. I can say, great, I'll do qualitative with my class this year, or great, let's do qualitative. I'll go find a different quantitative project for the students in 25, and we'll come do a big quant round in 26. But if you feel like, hey, let's do some couple small groups in February to inform, we're going to decrease the discrimination questions and add some community belonging questions based on that qualitative research. We do get into a little bit of a time crunch on the translation. But I think it's possible to try to do qualitative. I just, like, November, December are really bad months to do qualitative because people are busy. And so I really feel like if you want to stack both next year, it's going to be like, let's come back from the holidays, schedule, like, get the word out in January for a couple of groups in February. Use that to influence the questionnaire that we probably would need to be pretty close on in March. And then we get it to translators and get it in the field by the end of April again. But from the student's perspective, it would be primarily a quantitative project. But from a commission's perspective, you would do a qualitative round that would inform the quantitative project.
For any grants too, I think having our database up and running would be really helpful because we can use that data. Like Robert, you know, all the stuff we're doing with ArcGIS or whatever it's called. So if we had that data, writing a grant actually wouldn't be that difficult, I don't think, to get the funding.
I think there's ways, I think there's pathways to get the community involvement for you know, some qualitative, you know, data collection and focus groups. I think just, you know, given this community, like, given this commission's focus and, you know, this committee's, I think there's a way to get, you know, some good buy-in. I guess. So it sounds like we would explore potentially hosting a few focus groups in February to help inform the questions that we would want to put in this year's survey. Which I could see anything actually kind of being helpful because, you know, those focus groups could allow us to gather you know, kind of ideas and anything on what issues are important to people, because then we could pick up themes and then, you know, gauge, you know, questions and anything based on those themes. Some of the issues and everything that I get into with that is that if, you know, the survey changes over time, like, you know, the survey changes each year, and the focus that doesn't allow us to track historic trends anymore because then we're, you know, changing the survey, so we can't measure. You know, we can't measure a 5-year or 10-year period or anything to see if, you know, anything's really changed. And I guess that'd be my concern or thing with having a, you know, constantly shifting, you know, quantitative survey. I think the qualitative, you know, allows us to kind of, you know, understand people's, you know, like, feelings and opinions. And I almost wonder in that sense if, you know, the focus groups and qualitative data collection, I think, is better served after the quantitative data collection. I want to know what maybe your thoughts are on that.
Sure, yeah. So first I want to comment on the shifting questionnaire. You are right. Comparing year on year is really challenging. And even if we leave the questions exactly the same, our sampling methodology also has changed year on year. And because we don't have like a consistent base or a rep sample of Salem that's doing this every year, even if we leave the questions exactly the same, we are going to have to, with a grain of salt, say, here's how we fielded it this year, here's how we feel. I mean, if we're putting it up on Facebook, there might be the day we post it, you know, those people on Facebook are really cranky about something, or there's been something in the news, or there's been, so it's just, anytime we're kind of looking at cause and effect, that type of research is, it's just really challenging. And so I feel like because there are always going to be challenges in the type of research that we're doing, to say, you know, year on year, we can compare all of this. I feel like it's better to change the questionnaire to meet the key questions the commission is facing in a way that you feel is actionable, even if it's just for that year, than to say we're going to stick with what we asked the past years, because we still have to caveat the comparison.
Yeah.
You talked about qualitative then quant, or quantitative then qualitative. And I do a zigzag. My ideal methodology is qualitative to form quantitative. And then after you do the quant, you do qualitative to understand the quant. And then you say, oh, now based on what we've learned, next time we do the quantitative, it's going to be different. So it's this zig and zag between qualitative and quantitative. So your question of, is it better before or is it better after? Like the academician is both. Like, yes, both. I feel like in this particular scenario where we are, because we are saying, and I'm hearing it around the whole table, we want more in this questionnaire and more out of this research experience around community belonging. And like when I sat down to write those questions, and Ilana, it sounds like you and Kelsey kind of took a stab at some of these. I couldn't write them in a way that I was like, oh yeah, that resonates. People are going to look at that question and understand what we're saying, or we're given the right answer options. So in that situation, I'm saying we really need to do some qualitative, because we could take our best guess and write the quant questions, and our community might read it and be like, well, they give 3 answer options, but what we really should have given me was this or this or that. Or they'll scratch their heads and be like, I don't even really know what they're asking. Like, is community this, or is it that, or is it this? And then they'll circle something or click something, but we get the data back and we're like, huh, this doesn't really make sense. And sometimes it's because the question didn't really make sense. And so people were kind of guessing at what we were asking or what we were wanting. But I feel like to increase the focus of this project on community belonging, I would recommend doing qualitative first, because I feel like, at least I need, maybe you all have it better in your minds than I do, but I think we need to learn more so that we can write the right questions in a way that makes sense to people and have the answer options that they're looking for.
If I may, I'm gonna, and this'll feel like, oh, now we're gonna go in a different direction. So if I'll have to beg your patience. Okay.
I feel like we're all over the map right now.
Okay, good. Well, then let's keep going with that. I'm gonna
Let's keep going now. Let's.
and I'm hoping you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but just to bring a little history in, I think the beginning of the belonging was in wanting the survey to be accessible to a broader group. I think the commission recognized that maybe a limited number of people in Salem, perhaps people more likely to have experienced discrimination, were inclined to take the survey. Folks were worried about the label discrimination survey and wanted to essentially repackage or remarket the survey, and wondered if belonging felt more inclusive of all populations. But I think about your mission in chapter 97 of the code, and it's around examining sources of tension and things like that. Now, I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive ideas. There's nothing in that direction that's wrong, but I wondered if it is. I wanted to actually, I guess, just check that. Is that the direction that you want to go in, is trying to understand belonging? Or was that a strategy to make discrimination more palatable to talk about? I guess just to check that assumption.
I'll chime in on the history.
Yeah,
So we definitely did have a conversation, you know, when you send a survey out, you're like, oh, this survey's about socks, or this survey's about laundry detergent, or this survey's about discrimination. And like the response rates, and it's been studied, like, there are topics that people are more interested in. And so they're like, oh, I'll click that. That sounds cool. And, you know, somebody, I get in my inbox, here's a survey about laundry detergent. You know, if you're the person in a household that does the laundry, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I have a lot to say. But if you're the person in the household that doesn't do as much laundry, or like maybe you'll be like, oh, well, I'm not interested in that topic, or I don't do that very often. I don't really care about that. And then you're less likely to do it. And so there was conversation, you know, if we're saying this is the City of Salem discrimination survey, do we have people? Because, so one of the years we were doing it, I had checked it after a few days, and we had very few males, people identifying as male, who had done the survey. And so I had a son at the time who was 18 and a husband who was, and I was like, hey, we need people who identify as male to do this survey. I'm sending it to you. And my husband literally said to me, he got it in, I said, and he's like, this isn't like, I'm not the person you want to do this. And I was like, John, what are you talking about? We want everyone to do this. And he's like, I'm white, heterosexual male. You guys, it's about discrimination. You don't care about me. And I was like, really? Because yes, we do. And I was like, go do it. And he did. But I do feel like, you know, there are topics that people are going to say that is interesting to me, that's relevant to me. I have opinions about that. And so it was kind of at that time that we said, let's call it the belonging survey. And it also was after you had added people experiencing homelessness to the code. And so the question was, you know, we've accomplished that. And I think some of the data around just the universal experience of our neighbors living in unsheltered homelessness that are experiencing discrimination that informed some of those conversations. But do we broaden that? Are there other things to learn?
Yeah.
Elaine, I saw your hand. Is it Elon? I think I just said your name wrong. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that we should have some questions on discrimination, like I said earlier, just to like track a bit with what we've heard in the past. But we have had enough surveys on just like mainly focused on discrimination now, where I feel like moving on to belonging, we will also in that ask, where do you feel like you do not belong? And those places will most likely be where you've experienced a form of discrimination. Like you don't feel unwelcome for no reason. So it's still asking, it's still getting at the core of like, where can we help? And it's also just showing us who's already a like gold star example, who can we like build off of. So I think it's just like a more positive approach to the survey, and also might create more actionable items for us, as it will be a lot more like specific.
Helpful. I like it.
yeah.
So are we wanting to then, so if we're wanting to try to do focus groups in February, to help inform the questions that will be asked in the spring, how many focus groups would we think we would want to target in February? What groups, and then how do we know who to invite into those focus groups? Because I mean, that's going to be the other, you know, the other piece of it is identifying how many, you know, 4 to 6 person focus groups do we want, and what languages are we going to do them, and then what groups of people are we specifically trying to target. And I'm kind of new to this. I've never attended a focus group. And it's regret to admit, I should probably attend some more of them. But like, I think there's a lot of helpful information, but I also want to make sure that, you know, if we're doing it, that we're doing it right, and that we're collecting the information that we want, and that we're not just rushing into it in February, and that, you know, like we're essentially, you know, getting ahead of our skis when it comes to this. And so I guess I'm really not much help And that's where I kind of look at anything and wanting people's input is if we want to, pursue focus groups, we're looking at, we're in October now, we would have essentially 3 months to plan it. And literally really less than 3 months because we only meet once a month. And we're potentially gonna lose a meeting and anything due to the holidays, so we would essentially have 2 times to plan focus groups. And that's kind of where my concern comes into this. Yes.
So just jumping back to that survey that Kelsey and I worked on. So it's just a 4-question survey. And we made it short answer responses. So we could send this out to our listservs and put it on social media and just see how many responses we can get to supplement, and then just do like 2 focus groups, one in English, one in Spanish, and open it to like I also don't really know how focus groups work, but it can just be like open invite if you are in this community, and we'll send it to areas that we do want to focus, such as like maybe the elderly population, houseless population, youth. And that way we can kind of get away with only doing a small amount, depending on how many responses we get from the survey. And I can share my screen and show you the questions we came up with, or Gretchen could send them out at a later point.
I assume that they're all open-ended questions.
Yeah, we originally did have lists of stuff, but then we thought that might feel targeted at specific groups, and so we worried about how that would read as like a city survey. So just as like the standard introduction and translation information, and then where in Salem do you currently feel a sense of belonging? List as many locations as you would like. What qualities, characteristics, or policies made you feel welcomed at the spaces above? What qualities, characteristics, or policies have made you feel unwelcomed at any spaces in Salem? And then information that they could share that with Gretchen if they want to. And then just like a general, what do you believe are relevant to the committee? So. We can workshop that a bit, but do you think that that could supplement it so that we don't have to do too many focus groups?
I do think it can supplement. I don't think it can totally replace. And I do think that like I could see a conversation around a table using this kind of framework, which is great. Part of the challenge is that like if people just type in on these, I don't think you would know, like depending on the distribution, do they happen like, are they all skewing older, or are they like, I think that I would just want to make sure that we are hearing from multiple voices and multiple communities. And I do feel like when you sit in a focus group room and you are able to have a little bit more dialogue, then you get a little bit more information about the person. And you also have the opportunity to hear some of the whys. So I love the question, and I think the questions, and I think that that will get you really useful and interesting and helpful information. But I think in terms of actually informing the quantitative, I can see it as a supplement, but I would want to still do some qualitative. And I think that 2 groups, one in English, one in Spanish, I think we probably need to do more like 5 groups. 4 is probably my minimum if we said, and I think the easiest way to do them is going to be to partner with some CVOs and have, the YMCA and Pride and the Arches or the Rock, and then one of the Spanish speaking, I don't know if it's Farm Workers or Mano a Mano or Pecun,
Maybe
I mean,
Center
Salem for Refugees would be great. Like, it's hard to just be like, here's the 5. But
Center
we did-
50 plus too would be another good one
that
for
would be
elderly.
great. Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
gonna just remind, we had feedback a couple months ago about, can you do something in Swahili? And the group was interested, and so that might be another path to explore.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, my dog's freaking out. So please ignore that if you can. I do think that doing 5 focus groups in the timeline we currently have would not be enough time to thoughtfully do it. So in that case, would the recommendation be to have the students do the qualitative and have it just be a qualitative year?
Is your concern in preparing for 5 focus groups?
Yes, and like the planning that it would take, like because we'd have to coordinate with at least 5. I'm so sorry about my dog.
Okay, no worries. Not bothering you.
We would have to coordinate in like 5 different locations, it sounds like, and multiple languages, and figure out some way to like feed and compensate people. Correct me, like if y'all think that we can do it, you have way more experience. So like, please. It just to me sounds like something that would be really hard to do.
I should say, I feel worried about my bandwidth until February, just because of some things I've got on my plate in the next 3 months. I think I'd be more capable of beginning that in February than I would be in beginning it now for February. Unless my tasks were more minimal, like I can certainly schedule Pringle Hall, but so it would kind of depend on what comes to me.
Yeah, I think the problem that we also run into is that, doing all these focus groups, given people's bandwidth and the fact that we only meet once a month, if considering that we couldn't make decisions and everything without having, like a quorum and everything, and without it being done in public space, and it would mean that we'd have to then schedule these out as essentially, special work sessions, or, we'd have to meet more frequently to, make decisions, and I just don't think that we have the capacity to do that. Now, like if it was, we could run off and everything and do it without having to meet as a group and everything, and, somebody was dedicating, like 40 hours a week to it and everything, they were hyper-fixated on the program and everything, like, no problem. Like if like I could just, like, we were just, one of us was taking the ball and running with it right now, and we didn't have to worry about, some of these other, rules, regulations and stuff, then certainly I think we could easily get 5 focus groups. We could probably have 5 focus groups and everything before tomorrow at noon. The motivation I think this group has, right? Like I think like a lot of that stuff would be worked out, but I think that is my concern, and I think probably maybe doing a qualitative survey again this year,
So do a
quantitative survey, keeping the same questions that we had last year, and then we could utilize this kind of thing rather than making changes and everything to the survey and everything, rolling out the same survey that we have, and then we could use some of the time thing from this committee and planning for focus groups to maybe happen after like we could start planning the focus groups, but not focus on having it done before the survey, and essentially just buying ourselves a bit more of a runway, considering how we would do our qualitative data collection.
I am totally happy to go with your recommendation, and like I understand there's processes that have to be followed and bandwidth, like yes. I don't think that I am comfortable to say let's just field the same survey,
Okay.
but we could make incremental changes. So if we say, we want less questions about discrimination and more questions about belonging, and we would have loved to do a set of qualitative to inform those, wasn't in the cards for this year, but let's do the best we can with input from the commissioners, with comments we've heard while we're tabling, with, online, what people have responded, and put some, like, I think that I would like to at least include some other things around belonging.
Yeah.
And even, like you had said, what are places where you feel like you don't belong, and places where you feel safest? I mean, we have in the current questionnaire a whole list of places where people can say, this is where I've experienced discrimination. But if we said, okay, instead of asking that about discrimination, or maybe in addition to, we talk about it, we already have a list of types of places. And maybe there's some learning to say, let's get some quantitative data around that. And at least we step in the direction where it's more actionable, we learn as we go. I'm okay with that. Or if we say, let's, instead of the students doing one-on-one interviews with their friends, let's have them sit with Marianne and do one small focus group at the YMCA and talk about it. And if we wanted to add a place or change a wording, maybe we could do a step in the right direction, knowing that we're gonna do additional qualitative. But I don't wanna just field the questionnaire exactly as it is.
Do you have recommendations on what changes we should consider or explore with the survey, so we're not fielding the same survey this spring? Or did the students from last year have recommendation or suggestions on changes we can make to the survey?
Yes. I wanted to come today with like a very big picture, open mind for conversation. And I feel like based on this conversation, I could sit down with that survey and say, hey, what about something like this? Or I need some help crafting some questions that would help get at this. The students had a few very specific small comments, and I could pull those up, but their biggest comment was, if we're calling this a community belonging survey, we wish we were asking more questions about community belonging. And then I was like, okay, well, what do we want to ask? And it was kind of like, we don't know. But I think that, even just based on conversation tonight, we could pencil in a few that would maybe in 26, we're like, okay, now based on this qualitative, we want to refine those, but I think they would be a step in the right direction. So I would be happy. I know you guys have other business besides my.
Oh, no,
But-
no.
but I
for
also
today,
wonder
and we
if
can stay on this topic.
if
for
I
so
could
long.
be on an agenda again next month or the month after and be able to come back and say, okay, we talked. And because the trick with the survey is, like anything, you want people to be able to review and process. And we don't want to get to April 2nd and be like, oh, quick, we've got to decide because we need to be in field next week. And even, for example, Gretchen had given me feedback that somebody had talked to Willamette about including it in their outgo. And they have a process, they're like, great, but they don't want to just send extra emails and they want to look at the survey.
Yeah.
So if we say, oh, well, we're still writing it, then we run into issues with distribution, we run into issues with translation. So I would rather say, let's go ahead. You tell me when in the next few months I can come back and I'll noodle over a survey and then say, here's a few ideas and I need help here. And I think we can start making progress. Oh, and Kate's got her hand up.
Yes, Kate.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of how to say this, but one thing that I've always thought of about the survey is that we're asking people like where they feel like they belong or don't belong presently, like in this year. And then as Ilana was explaining those questions, it made me think of like, where do I feel like I don't feel comfortable or I do feel comfortable? I don't know if those places would honestly be on a list. I think they would mostly be like qualitative. For me, it's like a bookstore. Like I am most comfortable in a bookstore. That's my favorite happy place. But if you ask me to go to Home Depot, I hate going there. I hate like it feels like very toxic masculinity. Or like gyms. But the reason that I'm bringing this up is because maybe someone doesn't have a current trauma around a hospital setting, but they have past trauma around hospital settings. So it's not Salem Health that's the problem, but it's a long-term history with clinics and hospitals and discrimination and harassment that they've experienced. Maybe they were houseless and they're not now, but because of that trauma long term, it's changed the way that they feel or feel comfortable approaching healthcare, right? So I feel like there could be something to explore in how people perceive belonging and like at the timeline of that. How do you feel you belong like in spaces now, or I don't know how to like frame that, but it's something to think about because I keep thinking about it in present tense and I'm like, but really belonging isn't just now. It's all of these experiences that lead up to how you feel about a place overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's so important, like that sharing, as you just kind of talk through some of your spaces. And I'm thinking about like the location options, we have like businesses, i.e. bank, grocery, restaurant. I'm like, okay, but where is it? So what do you mark? Because you're like, I love going to bookstores. I don't like going to Home Depot, but they're both businesses. And so I don't know, even layering like just the checkbox. I mean, it makes me come back to qualitative, that it's that thought process that you just shared, where I'm like, I get it. But I think if someone just marks businesses, I'm gonna be like, oh, okay. And I'm not sure that we'll really learn like we just did when you shared your perspective and experience. Definitely lost some
Yeah,
people.
I think that could be a good argument for qualitative. Ilana?
Yeah, I also like I'm team qualitative, but I understand that we have restrictions. And I do think that like a way that we could start to get at that is saying like in the past year, where have you felt belong in? Generally throughout your life, where have you felt belong in? And we can break it down like small businesses. Cause like I worked at Home Depot. I also don't like going there. But if it's like a small like Salem Tools, I love going there. So you can like break it down by like big businesses, small local business, BIPOC owned business, queer owned, like I think that we can get into the nitty-gritty. It it won't be as great as qualitative, but it will be a great start, and then it can help guide us in our journey of qualitative afterwards.
I also, Alana, I'm thinking about your question about like what qualities, policies, et cetera, made you feel safe there. And I wonder, even if it is kind of a, check the box, but then, we did last year say, okay, you marked this, tell us why. Or, looking at where you mark that you're safe, do you have a story you want to share, an experience you want to share, or do you want to tell something more specific? And like I'm saying, when we put an open end and quantitative, a lot of people just skip it, and that's so fine. Like, I don't want somebody like, oh, I don't want to write my life story, I quit, I'm done with the survey. But if it's optional, they just skip it if they want to. But we've had hundreds of people type stuff in, and as long as we're not asking 20 times, I mean, we can invite people to say, like, what is it about when you're thinking about places you feel safe, can you tell us about some of those places, and what is it about them that help you feel safe or help you feel a sense of belonging? And somebody's going to say, well, I just love bookstores, and someone's going to be like, oh, the smaller, the black. Like, I think we can give people the opportunity, invite them to share that. And we might have to say, then we're not going to ask the open end about bias crimes, because we want to use our open end spaces here. But I think people would choose some of them, hundreds of them in some likely universe, to give us more information about why that would feel qualitative, even in a quantitative tool.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea for you to noodle on all that we have discussed, and come back in a later month or
Perfect.
months. And I think that moving forward with quantitative this year and then HRC doing qualitative in response to that would be the best, just logistically.
Okay,
And
what
also
are your
just
thoughts?
flagging, we do have 15 minutes left. Sorry.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
I think, Robert, I think you and I can find funding somewhere, but I
Yeah,
agree with the timeline.
I know, I absolutely agree. I think there's ways in it that we could drum that up, but I I I kind of I agree with kind of Alana's, path forward. I think it gives us a clear direction, and inviting the professor to come back at the next meeting if she's willing to, dedicate her
When's
time.
the next meeting?
We're actually.
Or that's actually gonna be the
talking
next
about that.
thing.
That's the
So,
next conversation.
do we wanna move on
Holidays.
to the next, to discussing when our next meeting is? All right, okay, so we have some conflict, it sounds like, for the next meeting with its adjacency to a holiday. And we're looking at moving that. And I think the other committee that some of us are on that meets prior to this had agreed to kind of opt for a doodle poll of when might be the best time to meet towards the beginning of December, so essentially skipping a November meeting, but then just meeting the beginning part of December to kind of capture both the November and December in the same month. What are people's thoughts on doing that to see if we can align this committee's rescheduled meeting with that of the LGBTQIA plus committee?
I agree, and that also frees up our Gretchen's time as well.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would you be able to include on that doodle poll the Professor Bradshaw so that
Yeah,
she can mark her
please.
availability so
That'd
that
be
we can
great.
try
Thank
to schedule from there?
Yeah,
Um,
copy.
so covers that. We do only have about 15 minutes. Are you guys okay with so we'll move on to October, December engagements at university and neighborhood associations. I'm not sure if there's really been any movement.
I've been tinkering with it, like we talked to Shemeketa and learned that the event was actually October 26th instead of 28th. We had people on the 28th, but not the 26th, so we opted out of that. I have a meeting with somebody from Willamette next week to learn more about engagements, but what I have is just the start of a Google Doc where you can sign up for neighborhood association engagements, and I can throw in some other engagements, and I thought I'd basically finish that and send it out and see if folks want to be signing up for those things during the next couple months.
I think that's great. Any other discussion?
That sounds good.
Okay. Just in the interest of time, I think by the time we got the material pulled up for the dashboard, we would run out of our time. So is there any objection to skipping the dashboard agenda item and then moving into awareness communications? Hearing no objection, Gretchen, do you have any?
Perfect. Yeah, I think awareness communication would definitely be the Transgender Day of Remembrance this month. So as soon as we get the material ready from the other group, we'll post that on the listserv, and I feel like that'll be our comms this month, if that sounds all right.
Okay.
Great.
Question, is there anything around psychological safety around election season that, like, anything going on in the community that we could promote? I just feel like a lot of people are a little nervous right now. So if we could support different groups, I think maybe even Levy might know, but I can reach out and see if he has any ideas. But
I
anything
don't
that
know.
I'm aware of some things from a rural standpoint. So there's the Rural Organizing Project, and they are doing a Zoom after the election as just being a gathering space for folks in rural areas, just to gather and share. And I was at a meeting where they were talking, I do a lot of work in Polk County, just like kind of either way it goes, people are nervous. So I don't know from a City of Salem standpoint what a space like that would look like.
Good
Or
question.
who could host, but.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
can send you what ROP's doing. They lean liberal progressive.
I wonder if the League of Women's Voters would be a good,
Good question.
like if they might be interested in, facilitating, or if they have plans for something
Yeah,
around that.
yeah.
Or if we provided, or if we're able to get the information that Professor Bradshaw was talking about, if we were able to provide it to them, that they might be interested in, utilizing that and
Yeah.
maybe building on that for something specific to Salem.
I'd be happy to ask them. Yeah.
yeah, or even just during a note in the message that during this time, here's a reminder of our bias hotline or what, something that just
Oh,
makes
yeah.
people
oh,
feel
Yeah, it's a,
protected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ilana, do you know of anything? I know you're pretty tapped into a lot of policy and
No, I haven't heard of anything. I know of watch parties, but that's not quite like the psychological support. But I think it's a great idea. And yeah, if we have any resources we could put in the newsletter or do a social media post about, I think that would be great.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the conversation, the rural conversation was, people are saying, well, does Independence or Monmouth want to host something to say, we're gonna come to community and have a safe space. But the challenge is that it's hard to just bring a community together and feel like it's gonna be a safe space for everybody.
Yeah.
So ROP is very open about their democratic leanings and advocacy and LGBTQ welcoming policies. And so they're saying, well, people who opt into this space are gonna be people who then will be safe for each other.
Mhm.
So like Independence, the folks who were there were like, well, we're not gonna just do a community way, come have this safe space, because how do we host a space that's safe for everybody? We don't know who's gonna show up. So I mean, the League of Women Voters, it might be challenging.
Yeah.
For them to do something, but
Yeah, I do not think that we should host an event
yeah,
for safety reasons, but I do think that we should share resources such as hotlines or like support groups or something like that that has already vetted or established their procedure.
yeah, like that. I agree with that course of action
Mhm.
versus trying to prepare an event, but just sharing resources on people.
so fast.
Yeah, election day is like 13 days away, so.
Ooh.
All right, looks like we're at our last topic, member remarks and announcements. Yeah, anything? I have a few. First, over the weekend, the city did their volunteer appreciation, and I just want to take a moment to thank my fellow committee members, my fellow commissioners, and anybody that's listening and watching this who is a volunteers their time on other boards or volunteers within the city of Salem. I truly believe that volunteerism is how we make our communities better, safer, and thrivable for everybody. And we recognize that everybody's got a lot of other things they could be doing with their time, and yet they spend that time giving back in service of others. And so I appreciate both of you guys on this call, and my fellow commissioners that will watch this later. Thank you all for all you do. Thanks to the city staff for all of their time putting together the event and all the time that they dedicate to these. To liaising to these boards. Yes, I know that you're technically on the clock, but when you add up the additional time that you spend working here, it definitely translates into free. So I want to thank all the city staff as well for supporting us volunteers in the work that we do. And lastly, I want to thank Professor Bradshaw for all the work that she puts into this survey every year. And then her guidance and her, advising on this committee and the commissioner thing on ways that we can improve the survey. And so thank you for spending, your last hour and 15 minutes here with us on a Wednesday night. And I appreciate your willingness to come back next month and
Sure.
to, providing all that additional support to ensure that this is a successful survey. So thank you so much.
It's really kind of you. And thanks to all of you for your hard work. And I mean, we're just like making the world a better place. So I love it. Yeah.
Trying to one Wednesday night at a time. If there's nothing further, then we'll adjourn.
Very good.